People saw what was happening and they were trying to fight against it. The problem was all they could really do was protest. And there wasn't enough people willing to give up the music. So many people thought that they were just over exaggerating and they just couldn't see the bigger picture of where this thing was headed. And then you had the factor of a lot of rappers going after people like C. Dolores Tucker and other people who were fighting against this music, making it seem like they were attacking hip hop specifically, when in reality, it was always a fight against that negative hip hop, a fight specifically against gangster rap. But again, all they could do was protest. They didn't have the power to actually stop this music. They didn't own the record labels that were signing these artists, the distribution companies that were distributing the music, the television stations playing the music videos. And again, it got to a point where even radio was completely controlled by these major corporations. So there was really no way to stop this. And we see where it is now. Everything that they were establishing with gangster rap, with 2 Live Crew in the 80s has been fully integrated into hip hop culture. They have completely changed what hip hop is to what they probably always wanted it to be. And all of this stuff, the over exaggeration of the guns, the drugs, the pimp culture, it all stems back to black exploitation movies of the 1970s, back when there was a lot less roles for black people in Hollywood. And the majority of the roles that they could get were portraying these blaxploitation stereotypes, basically portraying all the worst aspects of the community. You know, the pimps, the prostitutes, the drug dealers, and putting these characterizations of black people on a pedestal and basically turning all these negative aspects of the community into the most prevalent image of the community, into these heroes, into these role models. And we see it's the same thing with hip hop today. The glorification of the pimps, the drug dealers, the prostitutes, every single negative aspect of the community placed on a pedestal. It's literally just a new form of black exploitation. And before those black exploitation movies, when black people had even less opportunities in Hollywood, we had the minstrel shows, which were designed to use music and entertainment to push all these negative stereotypes. And this all stems back to Jim Crow, which was an entire marketing campaign from the late 1800s all the way to 1950, designed to heavily enforce and push these stereotypes. And when you look at so much of the stuff from Jim Crow, it is so similar to the stuff we were getting from gangster rap and what we've been getting from hip hop ever since then. Again, it is like hip hop is the modern day Jim Crow. And, you know, a lot of times back then they would use blackface to portray these stereotypes. But it's like they just traded the blackface and are now just paying the actual people to portray and reinforce these stereotypes. I mean, you look at some of these videos of these rappers performing for radio executives, and it really does just look like a modern day minstrel. And the crazy part is that those thug, gangsta elements of this culture didn't even start with hip hop. You can go back and you can see where the roots of this started. You know, while Jim Crow was still going on, these were the original gangsters, the original thugs. This is who was toting the guns, pushing the drugs, and they have now flipped it through this thing called hip hop and made this our culture. There's crime, there's violence everywhere in every part of the world, but they have found a way through this music to make those criminal aspects of the community the ultimate representation of the community as a whole and what black culture is. And because they control the mainstream media, they've been able to push these images out to the world. It's another case where you can just see the power that hip hop has to influence people, because you can see those negative stereotypes being emulated by everybody. It's like they're using this music, using the power of hip hop to dumb down the masses. And you can see people falling victim to it everywhere. There is no denying the effects this music is having and what its purpose is to poison the mind of the people listening to it. I mean, when you got rappers, the people that are recording the music, coming out and saying that they don't even allow their own children to listen to their music, you got to know something is wrong with this music. Remember, we had Cardi B, one of the most popular rappers right now, who recently got called out for keeping her music away from her daughter, even though this music is being pushed out onto the rest of the world.
Cardi B is defending the fact that she does not let her 2-year-old daughter Culture listen to her music. A couple days ago, Rap TV tweeted a clip of Cardi's Instagram Live from August where she turns off her hit WAP after Culture comes into the room.
Oh yeah, kids are here, I forgot.
There are a ton of videos online, whether it be TikTok or whatever, where people love filming their little children singing the lyrics to WAP. And I think more fans should be like Cardi, where when the kid walked in the room, the song turned off because it wasn't funny. And it's not funny if that kid starts singing those lyrics, but a lot of people do find it funny. And I find it interesting that the artist of that song wound up being the adult in the room.
But again, we have no control over the industry. We can't stop what's being put out there. We don't control what's on the radio. We don't control what's in the mainstream. But what we do have control of is ourselves. And when it comes to protecting your mind, you are the number one line of defense for your own mind. And when it comes down to it, no matter what they're throwing at us through the mainstream, we have the power to just not make it a part of our reality, to not give it any attention, to not give it any energy. But I think it's definitely important to avoid this stuff at all costs because, I can speak from experience. Being young, having that impressionable mind, not having a father figure or a strong male role model around, and being influenced heavily by this music, wanting to be a thug, wanting to be out in the streets, because this is what the music was telling me that a real man was, that a successful man was. And I wasn't conscious enough to see that this music was influencing me towards my own destruction. I had to grow in wisdom and maturity to see it. And once I saw it, once I started operating from a higher level of consciousness, I couldn't even listen to the first couple of lines of the music. The music just wasn't resonating with me at all anymore. And if you're trying to continue to grow and become the best version of yourself, the majority of this music is designed to speak to your lower self, to that animalistic part of yourself, that part of you that's just concerned about survival, your basic instincts, keeping you focused on the material and not reaching for any higher levels of consciousness. And just with the way music infiltrates the brain without first being processed, just lets you know we should really be guarding what we're listening to. And once that music enters the auditory cortex and that music is finally processed, it gets processed within the cerebral cortex, inside the temporal lobe. And also sitting inside the temporal lobe is the pineal gland. And when you look at this area from outside the brain, it's referred to as the temple. So everything you listen to after making its way through the auditory cortex is embedding itself in your temple. And again, you are the number one line of defense for your own mind, for your own temple. For me personally, I don't listen to any mainstream hip hop, really any mainstream music, or should I say any current mainstream hip hop or mainstream music. I connect more to a lot of older music going back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s. For me, the greatest music group of all time is Earth, Wind, and Fire. The greatest musicians of all time, in my personal opinion. And I listen to a little bit of everything. I'm not really limited on what I listen to. A lot of old school R&B, but then I like some old school progressive rock, Kansas, Alan Parsons Project, Steely Dan. But then I'll curve all the way to, artists like Enya, Sade, India Ari. And from time to time, I would listen to classical music because I have experienced the power that music has to completely shift your mindset. I can be in a crazy mood, filled with anxiety, just feeling crazy. And I could turn that classical music on and it just sets everything in order. But like I said, I'm all over the place musically. 80s freestyle, even down to the cheesy 80s stuff. And like I said, I do listen to old school hip hop, 80s, early 90s. But just like with any music that I listen to, I'm really particular about which artists I listen to and what songs I listen to. It's got to resonate with where I'm at right now. It's got to resonate with me on a higher level. And one of the things that kind of goes unchecked with the old school hip hop of the past, I'm talking about going all the way back to Sugar Hill Gang, is that there's always been this counteractive mindset when it comes to male-female relationships. There's always been this level of disrespect of women and lack of sexual discipline that's kind of permeated hip hop music since the beginning. You'll very rarely, even when the music was at its best, find songs that promote sexual discipline and being 100% committed to one woman. We had a few anomalies here and there. MC Shy D, I Don't Want to Treat You Wrong, Heavy D and the Boys, Dedicated, which was literally a song about staying dedicated in a relationship. And there are some others, definitely a lot more than we have today. But there was a lot of that programming of, spreading yourself around, throwing your seed everywhere, creating all these soul ties, exchanging all this energy, and just having no type of sexual discipline. I mean, even the artists that made the few songs about being in a relationship and sharing love with a woman still had these other songs that completely counteracted that message. So yeah, for me personally, I choose to stay away from that type of old school hip hop. It doesn't resonate with me personally. But yeah, man, I know this was a lengthy video. It was a lot to get into. I appreciate you for sticking through to the end. And the overall arcing message here is just to protect your mind, protect your temple, that higher version of yourself that connects you to things, outside of all this. We got to be the number one line of defense for our own higher mind. And the only way to do that is to be conscious of what you're listening to, which means to be critical and to be analytical of everything that is entering your auditory cortex. And if you don't want it there, then don't make it part of your reality. Again, there is a clear war for our minds, and we have to be the number one line of defense against all that negative programming. And if you're striving to live a righteous, honorable life, it becomes that much easier because it'll be like trying to ingest something that you're allergic to. You'll just regurgitate it back up. Your system just will not allow you to take that in. But yeah, again, thanks for watching. This video will most definitely get a lot of copyright strikes, but it did take a ton of work. So, if you feel so obliged, please support by donating. If you haven't already, you can also purchase the Truth About Space series. I know I got a lot of people that are waiting on part 5, and that will be coming soon. That'll be the next thing that I drop. Probably expect to see that by like the middle of this year. It's going to take some time to put all that together, but it is coming. And I appreciate everybody for being patient. I really just wanted to make sure that I drop this on YouTube. The need to have this conversation has been sitting in me for a while, and I'm glad to have finally gotten it out. Once they gave 3 6 Mafia an Oscar for It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp, that was the ultimate sign that this thing was hijacked, that the mainstream hip hop was done. Even though they've been signaling for a while, that the music has been hijacked. And then we see where it is now. They're still throwing up the same signs, and the music is getting even worse. It's an even more deliberate attack on the mind of the listener. But until next time, peace, love, and stay up.